the classic anime Cowboy Bebop, which, of course, as many of you know, recently got its Netflix adaptation, its live-action adaptation, which they've been talking about doing a Cowboy Bebop live-action adaptation for a while. They were originally, I think Keanu Reeves was attached to doing a movie version of Cowboy Bebop, but that never came to fruition. And then eventually we got this version from Netflix with John Cho and Mustafa something. I'm blanking on his name right now. I'm sure I'll remember it. I'm sure I'll look it up later. But I thought, and overall, well, actually, let's first talk about, I guess, like our experience with the anime, which, for me personally, I always knew the anime existed. I remember it airing on Adult Swim, but I never actually watched it. And recently, like, we have been, trying to get through it. But I'll full disclosure, I wouldn't consider myself like a fan of the anime. Like, I like it. I understand like the style of it and all that, but I'm not like one of these like super like diehard fans of it. I'm just have been taking a casual interest in it very recently, in recent years. What was your experience with it?
Well, originally, maybe mid-2000s, my brother gave me a DVD collection that was the best of Cowboy Bebop, which is really interesting because I watched sort of sporadic episodes, but I don't know why when it's not that many episodes you really need a best of. You just need to watch Cowboy Bebop, because I've been enjoying it much more recently as we've been watching it this year. Just going sequentially and understanding the storyline a lot better, because seeing it as like one-off episodes, they sometimes have different themes and kind of touch on things and end somewhat abruptly, often with disappointment. Like they very often don't get what they're looking for in the episode. Just really interesting. I think it's actually a pretty cool choice, because so often you have this, the heroes always win. Every single episode of the series, there's a triumph. And so seeing like a whole bunch of disappointments is pretty cool. And I didn't understand it as well, like just catching the best of episodes. I thought the style was really neat, but I didn't really get hooked into the storyline and the characters. I just sort of appreciated the talent behind the anime, and I love the tone. I love the sort of jazz titling and the jazz soundtracks, and the fact that they're putting it forward as Cowboy Bebop, not just a show, but something so individual that it creates its own genre. That other things could be in
there's that little title card that says like
the Cowboy Bebop
it will
genre.
create its own genre, and it will be called Cowboy. That's like
I think that's so cute that they, with all that confidence, in the late 90s, like just put that forward, and we're like, this is its own things, and it's just going to be known as Cowboy Bebop. And so now I've been appreciating it so much more. Like the tone is just totally hitting a sweet spot for me. And watching the anime in preparation for the live action coming out, I was so much more hooked in to the storyline and the characters, and I like the framing, I like the art, I just like what they've done with it, like the perspective of the artistry, like the sort of uber perspective of how things are shot and how things are cut together and all of that. It just seems really, really slick and fun and interesting, and I love how often they don't get their bounty. They're just
right.
Cowboys going for their bounties, and it's like, oh well, see you next time, Cowboys.
It's so funny because like
it's more like real life. We try a lot, and we basically like, oh well, see you next time, Cowboys.
But it's so funny because like watching the anime, you go through so many episodes and they don't get the bounty, and they don't get a bounty, and at some point you start wondering like, how are these people still like alive and still like haven't like given up on the whole bounty hunting thing? Like, how are they not just choosing different careers at this point because they kind of suck at the bounty hunting? They
can barely afford their noodles,
right?
It's like, how are you going to get more noodles when this many people get away?
Yeah, but it's you spoke to the style, and that's really the thing that sticks out to me as why the series is so influential is really the style, and that's kind of thing I latched onto. But the thing that like really kind of felt like a weak spot, at least watching the anime, is the characters. Like, the characters are okay, and you get little glimpses of, like, their backstories and whatever, but, like, Spike is just kind of like, whatever. He's just kind of like blank slate, kind of like Han Solo kind of type of, like, whatever happens, happens. He just throws himself into danger, but he's not really all that interesting of a character. Like, you get a little bit of glimpses of his backstory or whatever, and he's tied to this villain assassin Vicious, who shows up from time to time in the anime, but you don't really get a whole lot of him either. And it's just kind of, it's just, you don't really attach to the characters. And Faye is kind of like, she's a brat. She's kind of like super entitled and whatever. And, Jet's cool, but like, he's just, again, kind of like stoic, kind of like just, he's kind of like the one who's trying to like hold everything together, I guess, like the former cop who's just kind of like, but that's just what I got from the anime. What was, I guess, I'll ask you first before I go into mine. Like, what was kind of your feelings watching the Netflix version versus the anime version?
Well, I thought they did a really nice job right away of jumping into episodes woven with backstory. So then there's like a foreground story of the bounty they're after and the story of the people they're hunting. And they pick interesting early episode characters. They're not in the same order as the anime, so they're excerpting the nemesis or the bounties from the anime, and then they're adapting those, and then they're weaving it with how they're introducing the backstory of the characters, and they're going straight for that backstory. That right away you're seeing that there's a lot that's sort of hidden that's super important to each character, so you get the sense right away that Spike has a backstory that's super important to him, and Jet has a backstory that's really formative for him. And very quickly they reveal that Faye has a lot going on that's really important for her. So I felt like they kind of hooked you into the really important points, not hitting you over the head with it, but they're introducing them and weaving them into episodes 1, 2, 3, 4. Like, right away you're seeing that, okay, well, when are these characters who supposedly trust each other, who have a job to do together where you have to trust each other, but none of them are telling each other the actual backstories of what's happened and what's motivating them. So then you're a little more intrigued of like, when are they going to discover the truth of each other? When are they going to maybe disclose something about themselves to each other? Like, and in the anime, it was a lot more sort of arbitrary and ambivalent. Like, watching it early on, I couldn't really tell how many seasons might be coming. Like, it could be 6 whole series of the anime, and it's like 2 in a movie or whatever. But I couldn't really tell because they were so slow about trickling out information that was going to be essential to kind of put together what was going on and how these people found themselves together. So, like, the anime felt like it had all the time in the world, and you were just going to stick with it or not. To get to the juicy stuff, like underneath the surface. Whereas in the series, I feel like they were like, okay, we've got to get to the plot points. Like, so here's the reveal across the different characters and their relationships to other essential characters across the episodes. And they brought in a lot of the conflict that was going to be necessary to understand the characters quicker. Yeah. Like, much, much quicker.
Yes.
And style-wise, tone-wise, I just think it's brilliant. I thought the casting was brilliant. I love like John Cho as Spike, and he's not really drawn Asian, and Jet's not drawn as an African person or African American, but he's not American. He's from the universe, so he wouldn't be African American. He'd be Black or African descent person.
Right, yeah.
But I love the choices that they made to kind of cross cast things, and in some ways, Faye is drawn the most like a classic sort of vapid Japanese anime character, which they're almost like race neutral. But maybe you're supposed to assume they're all Asian because it's an Asian genre with fantasy ideals of women, and they kind of just make them, with huge eyes, tiny chins, huge boobs, itty bitty waists, more hips, itty bitty feet. And so, like, you kind of think, well, maybe all that means that these are all sort of blank faced Asian drawings in the women. Like, it's my biggest complaint with anime is like how sort of artificial and over exaggerated, and then on the face so blank they draw all the ladies. So with Faye, like, you can't really tell in the anime what they're trying to say about what she might look like, because it's an interesting world that still has all the different races and cultures across the human race, but now they're scattered to the stars, and you find them across all different like way stations and space stations and planets and ships, and you're still encountering all these different people. So I loved in the live action casting that They just made really clear choices. And yet the people look so beautifully silhouetted to match the kind of anime like shape and form. And yet they have so much more bearing, I think, as actors.
Yeah.
Like in how they present. I just think they're all great. I love the casting of all three of the leads.
Mm-hmm. No, I love the way they did. Like, I've heard a lot of people complain that like this Cowboy Bebop, this live action version is a little bit too close to the anime. That's a little bit too faithful to the anime, and in some cases, yes, I get what you're saying, because there's some times where they try and lift shots and lift certain things and music cues like directly from it, and in some cases it works, and in some cases it doesn't work. So I get that complaint, but at the same time, they did so many I feel like they did so many artistic choices that expanded upon it or remixed it. That was one thing I really liked in the review I saw in Nerdist of the Cowboy Bebop live action is it is a remix, it's not a cover. And I love that. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. Yeah. It's not like a cover version like you see so many times when people try and adapt things either from book or from anime so often. But it is a remix. I really like that way of describing it. And I might say something that's controversial here for some people who worship the anime and think that the live action is crap. But I think there's some ways that the live action improved on the anime, honestly, especially when it comes to the characters and the characterization of your leads. It worked for me, and it drawed me in way more than the anime did. That was honestly kind of the hard thing of. The anime, I get why the style is so classic, and I get why the soundtrack and everything, and the has kind of informed certain things. It's like Firefly, for instance. I think Firefly definitely drew some inspiration from the original Cowboy Bebop anime in terms of its style and the kind of the tropes and the kind of sci-fi motifs that's playing with. But in terms of the characterization, I think they took what was in the anime and I think they expanded upon it. Because there really wasn't there. I really felt like there wasn't much there, especially with the leads. I'm speaking specifically of Spike and Faye, for instance. It's hard to get into it because I kind of feel it's cool. It was cool to watch their adventures and the stories that they're telling with those characters, but the characters themselves, it's hard to kind of get into them. At least that's how I felt about it.
Yeah. And I mean, certainly from plot points and the way that they are showing you what's going to unfold in the storyline is completely remixed. It's all the plot points that are there, but they're done in a very, very different order, and they're much more forthright about trying to hook you in to be intrigued about that backstory of each person and what's going to happen with all the secrecy between each of them being intimately involved in each other's lives and yet all being very private. Maybe Jet the least so, but Spike and Faye are completely not honestly sharing any aspect of what's truly motivating them. Yeah. They've hidden their lives and their pain and the fact that, Spike chose to reinvent himself. Faye has found herself a blank slate and had to create a self. But there's this whole other thing about why, that's intriguing. And so I think style-wise, I really like a lot of the attention to detail and things that from the anime that showed up in the live action. I thought it was really brilliant because there have been things to try to do that. I think about the Terrible Hulk adaptation, the one that had Jennifer Connelly in it. They tried to have panels running across the screen.
The Ang Lee movie.
And stuff. And it was painful. It was awful.
I don't know what that was about. I feel like
I saw it in the theater and I was like, I usually face
I don't know what it
off and cue the doves, and I like your stuff, even if it's arch. I like it, but what is happening here? This is so bad. Yeah, everything about it was so bad.
Ang Lee was I'm making a comic book movie, so everything needs to have comic book panels.
And panels and
no, they don't. They really don't.
And like you can do some of that in a very, very tasteful way occasionally. Like you'll have the main action and it slides to the side, and then you see the second character in a different setting trying to defuse the bomb or whatever, and then the third character and the bad guys are coming in the hall in the smaller panel. And you have this sort of juxtaposition of different size panels that replicates the kind of positioning you see in a comic book, graphic novel, anime page. But now it's on screen. You can see that for like a few minutes, like done right, where it's really interesting and it allows you to tell the story simultaneously instead of cutting in time across storylines.
Yeah.
But like that Hulk is got to be the worst thing I've ever seen.
No,
trying to visually
well,
adapt comic book graphic novel style and presentation into film. I feel like Cowboy Bebop is maybe the best thing that I've seen. Ever doing it.
No,
so I don't actually agree with the people that are critiquing it for being too close to the graphic novel, because I think it was brilliant. I mean, it was beautiful. And the way that they found characters that then in the outline and these silhouettes could match so closely, and yet then you get into the detail of who they are, and they're so distinct, and they are much more fleshed out and relatable and real than the anime ones, which were a little bit more just like archetypes or stereotypes. Like they were kind of pasty, cut up characters, but I feel like in the live action,
I remember you were speaking specifically about like Faye. You didn't like how like scantily clad and how like big. You thought her boobs were out of proportion and stuff like that in the anime, and like I know I've heard. Of course, anime
like she's basically just a walking purple hairdo with massive breasts and a tiny little yellow top. Like that's kind of all she is. With like shorts riding up to here, and she's just sort of like laying around like a porn star everywhere, and yet she's supposed to be someone you take seriously as a bounty hunter who can hold her own. I mean, you do see her, flying and shooting, and but in between she's just like, oh yeah, and it's like, really, couldn't we, get it a little closer to how the respect that we treat men character with, like the male characters, right? You can see why you're supposed to respect their how athletic they are, how accurate they are with their marksmanship, how martially arts trained they are, how savvy they are at figuring out plots and coming up with anti-plots and unraveling plots. But the chicks is like, well, she just has a good ass and really big boobs on a tiny waist. So that's why she's there. And I feel like that's very insulting. Yeah. And there's just too much disparity. And then I like in the anime that they have Ed, who's this sort of like tween character, who's a genius, named Ed, who you find out is gendered female but doesn't necessarily relate to being female. And I do like that although it was a 90s and early 2000s kind of creation, that you have a lot of interesting cross-gender stuff and not knowing who's going to be what gender. You made an assumption from how people are clothed and how they're presenting that they're a certain gender, and then you find out they're a different gender. So there was some cool stuff that they were doing that was more progressive and more open-minded. So it made me frustrated that Faye was so one-dimensional as just a sex pot, and then there were so many other things they were doing that were progressive. So if you're not just female, then you can be really interesting in a transgendered way, and in a kind of omni or pansexual or unexpectedly sexual way. And if you're a man, then you have all kinds of range. But if you're a woman, you just have to have huge eyes, huge tits, tiny waist, little bit of hips, tiny feet, like go. And it's just so reductive. And there's just so many ways to be sexy. And there's so many ways that a female could be attractive. And it just frustrates me that you see this kind of overdone, sort of very exaggerated Barbie figure on all kinds of characters.
So what did you think about like Faye in the live action version versus the anime version? Because of course the diehard fans complain that they completely changed her, but like, come on, they're gonna complain about everything. But also, like, some people have just said she just feels like a completely different character. Like, what did you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they made her a more equal, substantive character that can hold her own in kind of complexity and being interesting. She's attractive, but so is Jet, and so is Spike. Like, so is Vicious. And, like the different characters, they have their sex appeal, they have their allure. They're all attractive beings. I mean, Jet's probably the most interesting, but I love that woman when she comes on to him and she wants to have a date with him. And what does he say?
Woodcock? Is that?
Woodcock, the lady Heidi Woodcock, who's just like all about Jet.
Yeah.
And what does she say? Oh my god, that line.
She says like, "You're black male. You're black and you're male."
Yeah, he was like, because she's trying to get a date out of him instead of payment for sharing some footage. And instead of taking payment, she says, "I want a date." And he says, "Well, I think that's blackmail." And she says, "Well, you are black and you are male." And it's just so, it's so cute. It's so hot, you know? And like, she's all about some Jet, you know?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And he is a really...
Oh, she's hit that. Yeah. She's hit that a couple times.
Yeah, and you can see why someone would want to. Like, he's a sexy man. So I like that each of them has interest in sex appeal, and I feel like they just brought Faye into the fold better, and I feel like she was really diminished as just like an empty-faced sex object for, I don't know, you know, private fanboy, private time with a hand and a towel and no one around.
I mean, like, that's a big part of anime. And to be
frustrating earlier.
And to be fair, like, again, like, I've seen other anime. It's way worse than other anime with, like, the super, like, you know, objectified, like, females.
No, they
like,
all have.
Again,
I mean, even
so with
Death
Cowboy
Note,
Bebop, it's like, there's
we
lesser.
We love Death
but,
Note,
like,
and even in Death Note, the animation,
right,
they have,
Misa,
like, a lot. Yeah, it's, like, the same thing with Misa, and, like, it's sort of blank face and huge eyes, and it's, like, the same little wonky proportions and you know, always the super breathy, high, feminine voice, and like they have secret depth. They like hold their own occasionally. You're like, oh, okay. But mostly it was not good. Mostly that thing. So I like it. And I mean, I know there's been critique, not just of Faye, but also of like Vicious.
Vicious is the main sticking point for a lot of fans, because Vicious is in the live action is a completely different character than in the anime. In the anime, he's just kind of like this stoic badass who like villain who's very like scary, and like he just comes in and like I've heard like, you know, some fans who were like really upset because like that first time he shows up in the anime, and like when Faye sees him in the anime, she's like terrified of this guy, and he's definitely does not come off so terrifying in the anime. You get in the live action, you get not only do you get way more of him, but he kind of seems like he's kind of like overcompensating for his own like insecurities a lot of the time. Like he definitely seems like a completely different character. Honestly, I did not have a problem with it. It is definitely different. It is a different character for sure, but I don't think it's worse. I think it's just different. Yeah, that's just me.
I felt like they were making a decision to kind of show that the bullying, vicious, sociopathic, vicious the adjective, not the name, sociopathic path of behavior is often affected. It's often put on. People take on that persona, and they, you know, are very into dominance and violence and harming without any seeming no concern for consequences. And maybe 20 years ago we could just go, oh, that's cool, it's just terrifying. And now I felt like there was actually, it was smarter, that they were like, no, that shit's always a front. You're covering for something. Your daddy didn't love you or something, but you're covering up. Like it's not terrifying. It's disgusting. It's sickening. Like I felt like Vicious was more accurate, because when there's so many more people that are like him that are just overcompensating, and you can see the like little terrified child within the big bully abusive power man. Like people recently elected, you know, the head of our country in the not so far distant past. Like I see the same kind of behavior, like this tiny terrified emasculated child who's constantly over you know, compensating for that. And pretending to be so big, bad, and scary. And you give them power, and they are scary because they do harm. You know, you see Vicious do things that are just reprehensible. Yeah. I really hate the scene where they have to close down the Red Eye production, and he just goes in and has everybody just like shoot apart all of the people that he calls his Fujis, that are like the naked people with the sewn eyes. Yeah. And they're like, just slaughter the help, because we don't know when we're going to set back up in production. We can just find more people off the street so their eyes shut and we'll be back and running. Yeah. So just kill them all. Oh yeah, and get my girl her chocolates. And like it's so disgusting. But it's more of a condemnation of people that are violent. And I respect that more than just saying, ooh, scary, arch villain, terrifying. Like, just be terrified. This is like, no, look beyond the terror and just see that this is like a very scared person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I thought that was more true.
Yeah.
Like, that to me is more real. For sure. And it has more sophistication than just having someone who is just sort of elusive and terrifying. It's more interesting to have someone who is occasionally terrifying and doing like, I mean, the actions that this guy is taking in the live action series are still terrifying. Because he still has power and a lot of bullets.
Yeah. And
so he can do a lot of harm between like that number of bullets, you know, and assistants and himself wielding them, and the amount of power that he's been given. He's a very dangerous person, and he is also fragile, and he is coming from something that he's reacting against that has sort of made him this way. And, you know, I don't really want to give away too many things if people haven't watched the live action series yet. Right. But, like, you see also more of his backstory. And you see kind of some, like, the factors that made him such a sort of wannabe sociopath. I mean, is he purely sociopathic or is it really put on? Like, it's kind of hard to tell in the live action.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to tell necessarily from the anime. There's just a little less of him. So I didn't really have a problem with the fact that there was more of him. And I felt like there was sort of both revealing and also sort of mocking of the sort of bully, terrorist archetype.
Right.
I thought I liked it because I think it's more sophisticated to treat it that way. Give it that many layers.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So like we're kind of trying to like not get too deep into spoilers, but like I'll say this one thing. So if you guys want to like skip ahead like a minute or whatever and don't want to spoil the series for yourself, I say overall just like go watch it, judge for yourself. So here's your spoiler warning. I'm going to go into a spoiler right now. So you were mentioning Ed earlier. I will say that was the one really weak point in this live action when Ed shows up at the very end of this show. Man, was that scene terrible.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. Like, I get it. It's hard to cast kid actors, but like, yeah.
Yeah.
That was really, really not good. Anyway.
Well, you know, it was one of those things that I was like, okay, this is super bizarre, and they're really going to have to work hard in season 2 to redeem this and explain it and kind of flesh this out. So I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because I had enjoyed all of season 1 so much that I was willing to hang in there and like come right back for season 2 and just kind of see where they were going to go with this. But yeah, I thought it was that introduction of Ed was awkward and questionable. And they must be so frustrated and disappointed because obviously they were introducing a lot of material to unfold in season 2, and I was interested to see where things were going to go because
and Netflix
it was getting so beyond the storyline of the anime.
Yeah.
In how they've unfolded the relationship between all the key characters and secrets being revealed, and so what's going to happen because the whole point is, you know, all these people are sort of hidden from each other. Like, so many people in that series are hidden from each other.
Exactly, yeah.
And they kind of revealed a lot of those secrets, and probably not all of them, but a lot of them unfold in season 1. And I thought that was really interesting because I was like, well, now they got to go totally off the map because they're obviously not going to be slowly peeling out plot points from the anime. Now they get to kind of freely develop people in this world. And I do think that the genre Cowboy Bebop is like awesome, and I loved seeing something in live action that had that same feeling as the anime had done in terms of the tone and the style and how the world was put together and the use of music. I thought it was just like brilliant. I was really looking forward to more. So Netflix.
I know, like they said that they canceled after season 1. I think that's bullcrap. I again, and I don't know what to chalk that up to. There's just not enough people watch it, or there's just too much fan backlash or whatever. Which I don't get why people were talking about it like it was like some people, not all. There's definitely been some support for it as well, like a good bit of like positivity. But there's also like people like talking about like it's the worst thing ever, and it's not. It's really not, y'all. Like, especially since most anime adaptations, especially, are like god awful. We're talking like your Dragon Ball Evolutions. Even in the Netflix camp, friggin' Death Note. Death Note, the anime, is one of my favorite animes ever, and my god, did they mess that one up? Oh my! I could not believe how wrong they got that one. Like, I was giving it a chance throughout, and at a certain point, it just went off the deep end, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? So it's really, so it's unfortunate when you get a good one, like I think Cowboy Bebop is, or like Alita Battle Angel is another one that I love, that I really hope gets a sequel, fingers crossed, but even that one's up in the air because that didn't do great at the box office. Did okay, but it didn't really do that good. So it's sad to see that when things like that, when you don't know what's going to happen with it.
Yeah.
Granted, there's a lot of like anime fans who will say, "Oh, you just need to watch the anime, just watch the original." But like, a lot of people won't give it a chance because they kind of look at it. Anime is kind of a hard medium to get into. You kind of have to like give it that opportunity or whatever. But like a lot of, especially like American audiences, like even like cinema fans or whatever, like have a hard time getting into anime. They really have to start like, and to its credit, like the original Cowboy Bebop anime is one of those like gateway drugs for a lot of people to like other anime because it's like such a like kind of like accessible kind of thing. But like, I don't know. I feel like it's unfortunate because like when you get a good one and then it doesn't do good, it's like, come on. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, why can't we have good things? You know?
Yeah. Well, I thought it was brilliant because across different live action things that get revealed, it has such unique style. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even that there are some things in the building of the world, the backstory of how the world evolved that way, that you could say there's some tone similarities between Firefly and Cowboy Bebop. They're also still totally different because there's like the slapstick sort of comedy, the ultraviolence, you know, the homage to the drawn form, you know, the jazz soundtrack, totally absent from Firefly. Not there at all. Never. Not a bit. They totally went with like old westerns and, you know, sort of Asian, traditional, and it just came out of totally different things. And the like sort of rock jazz style is so cool because you just don't see it done like that. And, you know, people got really into Ocean's 11 and there's like a whole bunch of different ocean films. And like they have a sort of savvy and stylishness Rat Pack sort of but modern thing to them that was enough to make lots and lots of really big movies. And I was really only interested enough to watch the first one, but I can see how people got into that enough to like make a bunch of big films that way. And now I think the emphasis in our culture is a little more on series than films. So I would certainly have thought there'd be enough fan support out there worldwide to make more Cowboy Bebop because it's so, I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was beautifully done and written in a smart way, but directed and cast and sort of the set decoration and the choice of how it was filmed was like so perfect. Like it was doing exactly what it wanted to do in a very distinct way. And that is very compelling to me. And there are just not enough things that do that. Most things are very conventional. This was very unconventional, or it was true to the convention of its anime heritage, and very unconventional unless you know that heritage.
Yeah.
So even if you never watched the anime, I thought the live action could really stand up on its own and be something impressive and fun and intriguing. You know, I think it's brilliant. I'll watch it I think I'll watch it multiple times, the whole series, just because it was so fun to see. And I did want more. And there were some things like, I don't know, Yeah. Like, do they go back and get Ein? Poor little Ein, he's on a dock.
I know, he's
like,
on a dock.
We have a corgi, like, don't leave that corgi. So, like, I need to know. I need to know what happened. Like, we got two corgis, and only one of them looks like Ein. The other one looks like the inverse. Black and white instead of red and white. But, yeah. So there were, like, some things that were, like, hanging and lingering, and I was very interested to start seeing how the second season would unfold, because they really left people kind of
there is
scattered.
There's a change.org petition, which who knows how well those things work, but, like, there's a change.org petition to get Cowboy Bebop renewed for season 2. I have signed it, full disclosure. So I encourage you to sign it. I encourage all of you out there who are listening to this or watching this to sign it. If you want to see more of the Cowboy Bebop live action, which I think there should be more of, at least a season 2. Can there at least be a season 2? You
Yeah.
give Stranger Things like 5 freaking seasons, for God's sakes. Like, can we at least just get one more season of
We had the
this? Like, come on.
Demodogs. I mean, we had a whole season about the Demodogs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bleh.
Meh.
Yeah, season 2 of Stranger Things was iffy. Yeah. Come on,
Yeah.
Will.
So,
Anyway, so that's...
obviously, we would like more Cowboy Bebop.
Exactly. So that's our piece on the live-action Cowboy Bebop Netflix.